hold on. Yes, we've been through all this. We're returning to our room. We remain in the common room. Actually, we're doing Hijikata's route, apparently. Yeah, remain in the common room. We've actually done all these options, and let's have faith.
Ah, そうだな。今は信じるしかねえよな。
It was unnerving. Hesuke and I made our way through the crowded, Alright. I don't know where this is going. Am I missing some responses? Hold up. Alright, we're gonna give a message to Miki. Oh. Oh, there's the difference. There's the difference. Alright, I was confused. I heard a sword and sheath from I heard a sword and sheath from its scabbard, and someone stood in front to shield me. Oh, actually, this is this is pretty similar to something. Alright. That I had cooked up. I guess in the back of my mind I was kinda thinking of this one. This person is
一体何の話をしているのかは分かりませんが、彼女は普通の女の子ですよ。昔からずっとね。
I love this sprite. I love this sprite way too fucking much. His brave words were directed at Kazuma, but his eyes glanced to mine reassuringly.
大丈夫ですか？間に合ってよかった。
Iba! Despite him standing before me, I was in complete disbelief that he was here. What are you doing here?
僕も家持公の護衛のためこの二条城を警護していたんです。奥詰めですからね。これでも。
That's the difference. Okay. Come to think of it, it made a lot of sense that Iba and Okuzume would be here for the shogunate. Kazuma flashed a hot white glare of contempt towards the blade pointed to his neck. His penetrated gaze burrowed into Iba.
なんだ貴様。邪魔立てするつもりか。
Iba was unshaken, and his resolve looked unbreakable as he stared at Kazuma.
あなたの答えによってはそうなるでしょうね。
貴様ごときに用はない。将軍の座敷犬ならそれらしく城の中で尻尾を振っているがいい。
そういうわけにはいきませんよ。彼女の意志を無視して連れ去ろうとするのなら阻止するほかありません。
You could hear a pin drop in the silence of their sustained staring contest. Eventually, Kazuma turned towards Amagiri and barked commands at him.
貴様ごとき、この俺が相手をしてやるまでもな。天霧、遊んでやれ。
Amagiri shrugged, then sighed, stepping forward.
やれやれ。風間では殺してしまいそうですし、知らぬいの獲物は手加減ができる代物ではない。となると、私がお相手するしかありませんか。
Amagiri assumed a fighting stance, and an aura of rage began emanating from him. The hairs on my body stood immediately. It felt as if I was suddenly plopped before some creature, its fangs ready to sink into me. It said that talented swordsmen, when crossing paths, can estimate one another's power by looking into each other's eyes without even drawing swords. Iba! My throat was dry from nervousness and worry, but I screamed his name as loudly as I could.
下がっていてください。怪我をするかもしれない。
But
下がっていなさいと言ったんです。
He raised his voice, repeating himself, and I retreated slowly behind him. I didn't think there was a chance Iba could lose. But I reached for my kodachi just in case. Iba re-gripped his sword and faced Amagiri. The tension seemed impenetrable. Then suddenly, Amagiri dropped his guard briefly, attempting to predict Iba's movements. Iba didn't miss that opportunity. He swiftly thrusted the tip of his blade towards Amagiri, but it was dodged immediately. Iba's eyes widened and mine did too. Amagiri possessed superhuman speed, and my human eyes couldn't follow him. But Iba did not yield. Iba's swordsmanship was masterful, almost superhuman as well, and he was able to corner Amagiri. He moved like a flowing river. His economy of motion was natural and in total control. It's so awe-inspiring that I forget I am watching a battle, not a performance.
なるほど。さすが奥詰めという大役を務めるだけのことはある。鬼の一族でも君とまともに立ち会える者は多くはないでしょう。その強さに敬意を表します。
The compliments from Amagiri came as a surprise to Iba and Kazuma as well, whose eyebrows furrowed deeply at this display. Look, God, I wish Amagiri had a root, because this man respects respect, and will compliment you if you are like worthy of it.
喋りすぎだぞ、天城。
A true battle between two highly skilled warriors left no room for a moment of reprieve. If one side were to become distracted, if even for a second, it could cost them their life. Iba exclaimed loudly as he swung his sword with an extreme amount of force. He had it in the bag. Or so I thought. He must have never anticipated in his entire life that someone could catch his sword with bare hands. Iba's expression was incredulous, and he gritted his teeth with frustration. Amagiri's eyes thinned before he spoke softly.
先ほどから狙いは腕や足ばかり。無視の相手には本気を出せませんか。どうやら人を切ったことがないと見受けられる。
Iba stared silently, offering no response. It seemed as though Amagiri's suggestion was not untrue, and Iba seemed bitter that his intentions were read in such a short amount of time. Amagiri closed his eyes and shook his head, gesturing that he had no further intention of continuing their fight.
くだらぬな。所詮将軍にこびるために身につけた座敷犬の芸というところ。人を殺せぬ剣に一体何の価値があるというのだ。
おいおいおい、一体何を遊んでやがんだよ。
Shinonui grew impatient, and he pulled out his handgun in irritation. The cold still shined, and the barrel was pointed towards Amagiri and Iba. No! Before I knew it, I was running towards Shiranui, and in a fit of confusion, I acted instinctively. I reached both arms, palm out, towards the gun that was pointed. In that moment, I had a gunshot fire off, and it rang so heavily in my head that it felt like my skull was slammed against the ground. After Iba screamed, there was a prolonged period of silence. Maybe I stumbled across I almost said Minerva. Nirvana. As I attempted to recollect myself, I opened my eyes slightly.
ったく余計な真似するんじゃねえよ。貴重な女鬼をよりによって俺の手で殺させるつもりか？
I guess Shiranui moved away at the last second, but then he took aim once more with his gun. His bullet shot through both of my hands. In the palm of my hands, crimson dripped through new holes that formed like a red spider lily.
大丈夫ですか？
Nijo. I tried my best to play off the intense pain, forcing a strained smile through my teeth. Iba, however, looked like he was in even more pain than when he was hit.
知らぬい。貴様貴重な女鬼の体に傷をつけるとはどういう了見なのだ。
んなこと言われてもしょうがねえだろうが。こいつがいきなり飛び出してきたんだからよ。あのままちんたらやってて人間どもが集まってきたら面倒なことになっただろうしな。
確かにそうか。我が刀を人間どもの血でいたずらに汚す必要もないだろうからな。
Kazuma then unsheathed his katana, its bright, blinding sheen disorienting me. Once again, Shiranui pointed his gun towards Iba. Amagiri quietly moved into his fighting stance. Although he tried his best to keep the posterity of his stance, Iba was looking shaken and he was sweating from the battle. He was having trouble when it was one-on-one, but now there's 3 of them to deal with. Iba gripped his sword with bloody fingers, and he slowly inched backwards. All of a sudden...
おいてめえら、ここ一体どこだと思ってやがるんだ。
I heard a familiar voice in the distance.
たく、まさかここでてめえらの面を拝むことになるとは思わなかったな。
確か天霧と言ったな。薩摩藩と懇意にしているあんたが何故ここにいる。
お前手怪我してるじゃねえか。まさかこいつらにやられたのか。
Oh, how did I...
八郎、急いでこいつの怪我の手当てをしてやってくれ。
分かってます。こちらへ。
I'm fine. This is nothing. Kazuma stared angrily in our direction as the Shinsengumi men arrived.
なんだ貴様らは。我々のことを勘ぐるより幕臣どもに媚びでも売ってきた方がいいのではないか。名をなす絶好の機会だろう。
そうはいかねえよ。池田屋の時といい、金門の変の時といい、きな臭え騒ぎの時には決まっててめえらが現れやがるからな。
Oh no, this line. This line, I can only think of that one scene in the Harry Potter movie where it's like, it's always you 3. Whenever shit happens. I can't.
孝行の憂いっつうのは、早いうちに立っとくに越したことはねえだろ。
Hijikata smiled wearily, pointing his sword towards Kazuma.
光明心に流行る卑しい犬どもが。
Kazuma was about to put Hijikata-san to the test.
風間、ここは引きましょう。我々は目的を十分に果たしたはずです。我ら鬼はあくまで歴史の陰に住まうもの。歴史を大きく動かすような真似をしてはなりません。
Kazuma briefly glared at Amagiri for discouraging him, but eventually his red eyes returned to me.
雪村の名を継ぐ女を。 我々が言ったことを夢夢忘れる。いずれお前を迎える。その時を楽しみに待っている。
待ちやがれ。
Ichigata-san attempted to chase after Kazuma and his cronies. However, they disappeared as if they melted into the darkness.
そう遠くへは行ってねえはずだ。近くを探すぞ。
承知。
おお、分かってるって。八郎、後のことは頼んだぜ。
Iba nodded to Harada and the other men ran after Kazuma, disappearing into the night. Silence returned, and all we could hear were the cries of insects and water in the canal.
手当てをしましょう。怪我したところを見せてください。
Iba was very gentle in approaching me, but I just couldn't show him my scars. There's no way I could let him see. This wound, where a bullet just pierced, an injury once so serious it shattered bones that had already healed. I can't let anyone know about my body. When I was a little girl, I remember that I had made a vow with someone. However, Iba's tone grew increasingly concerned. I hide my hands. That's what we have to do. No, I can't afford for Iba to find out about my body. Seems like my injuries were lighter than I thought. I can tend to myself, so please don't worry about me. I spoke hurriedly, but Iba just stared back at me. He wore a very stern expression, and there was a pause before he spoke again softly.
傷を見せたくない理由でもあるんですか？
Well, his probing questions put me on the spot, and for a moment it felt like it was difficult to speak.
見せてください。かばった女の子の肌に傷なんて残してしまっては武士の治れですから。
I contemplated. I gave up and showed both of my bloody hands to Iba. He softly grabbed my hands and slowly, gently wiped my wounds with his handkerchief. After wiping the dried blood, his hand suddenly stopped. I wouldn't blame him. The bullet wounds that were supposed to be in my hands had completely vanished. His eyes thinned, scanning me with a conspicuous gaze. Then he looked directly into my eyes.
君は
You see, I tried to play it off, but nothing reasonable came to mind. I closed my eyes and hung my head. I know, this isn't ordinary, huh? No matter how many times I got injured, my scars always healed immediately. I wonder when it was that I noticed that it wasn't normal.
君は負った傷がすぐに癒えませんか？並の人間とは思えぬほど怪我の治りが早くありませんか？
Earlier, Amagiri had noticed that my body could do unnatural things. They all thought I was one of them, but who were they? If their words were true, then I must be. Suddenly, Iba put his hands on my shoulders. It startled me, so I gasped tightly, but he stood there with a warm, kind smile.
大丈夫。あなたはただの女の子ですよ。
It was as if he could read my mind. But why?
僕は知っていますから。あなたが素直で優しい普通の女の子だということをずっと昔から知っていますから。
He tightened the grip on his hands on my shoulders a little more. His soft voice tingled my ears. It felt nostalgic.
あの時に交わした約束、ずっと守ってきてくれたんですね。
Eh? I responded a little surprised, but Iba quietly opened up before me.
覚えていませんか？一緒に手をつないでお菓子を買いに行ったり、行動さんの蘭学書を二人で読もうとしてさっぱりわからなくて頭を抱えたりもしましたよね。
Oh. The memories, ever so slowly fading through the years, started trickling in, gradually gaining color as Iba began to describe them to me. Yeah, that's right. When I was a child, there was an older boy that occasionally visited my father in order to read his books. He was a quiet fellow, always studiously reading. It was almost impossible to imagine that the boy who would become a talented swordsman whose duty is to guard the shogunate. That was really you? I still couldn't believe it, and he smiled shyly to me.
はい、君の秘密もその時に聞かせてもらったんです。その時に交わした約束は今もはっきりと覚えています。
His words made me gasp. You can't let anyone know that your injuries heal quickly. It wasn't my father who told me that. It was Iba. And there was another thing I remembered.
あの時の約束覚えてますか？
It was the promise he mentioned. All of a sudden, I was thrown back into a fresh plume of reverie. Revere? His name, the name I used to call him, came back to me. Hachiro. He squinted as if the sun shined in his eyes.
そうです。まさか忘れられてるとは思いませんでした。僕はずっと覚えてたのに。
Look, we'll soon learn when how she has very little memories of that age and Hachiro can remember. That is explained on a later route, I swear. I mean, you've gotten so tall, Hachiro. I don't remember you being this gallant.
凛々しい？僕がですか？
My cheeks felt hot. I could tell I was blushing beyond belief. I didn't mean anything by it. I was just speaking aloud. I only spoke what came to my head immediately, you know, like an ordinary girl. Iba's enthusiasm dropped a little, and he glanced to the side for a moment.
そうですか。つまらないな。あなたにそう思ってもらえたのなら嬉しかったのに。
Maybe I shouldn't have tried to correct my own words and just left it as it is. But it feels strange telling this to him in person. Iba sternly shifted the conversation, however.
さっきの3人はあなたのことを同胞と呼んでいましたが、心当たりは？
I suddenly shook my head. That's the thing. I have no idea.
気になりますね。彼らは君に妙に執着していた様子ですし。
What could those men know about me? They seem to know the history of my sword and of my name. Suddenly,
おい八郎、雪村、どこにいるんだ。
that voice.
トシさんたちが戻ってきたみたいですね。話の続きはまた今度にしましょうか。
When we met back with Hichikata-san, Iba recounted what just happened between us. But I guess, in the end, Kazuma and his men disappeared, leaving no trace behind, and the men were unable to hunt them down. Since then, once the rest of the men returned, there was a meeting among the captains. The subject of that meeting was the three men at Nijo Castle, Chikage Kazuma, Kyujo Amagiri, and Kyo Shiranui. They called themselves demons, and their previous encounters with the Shinsengumi suggested they were somehow involved with the Satsuma and Choshu. The Satsuma were the most powerful domain in the opposition domain, and the Choshu were publicly expressive of their dissent towards the shogunate. The Choshu were essentially enemies of the court. I don't know how the three men are supposedly affiliated with the domains, but it was abundantly clear they are not to be dealt with carelessly. There was another problem, however. Why had they come for me? They said I was one of them, and know about my family name and my kodachi. But how? My name is Chizuru Yukimura. I am the daughter of my father and my mother. I am a normal girl, nothing out of the ordinary. But who am I?